Exactly 25 years ago, the US Open came to Pinehurst for the very first time. And players, well, they weren't exactly thrilled about it.
I think the pins were very unfair yesterday. I think a lot of people will agree with that. And, well, I don't know if I'll be playing at Pebble next year, Roger. I just don't think it's worth my time and just feel that the courses are set up just really too unfair. I'm not going to go to Pebble and watch the USGA run that golf course either.
But then, during the final round of that year's US Open, something amazing happened. Payne Stewart started making putts. Lots of putts. He made almost every putt he looked at that Sunday. Until there were no more putts left to make. Payne Stewart set a record that day for the fewest number of putts during a final round of the US Open, and set a record for the longest putt ever to win a US Open on the final hole. If you go back and look closely all these years later, we can find lessons hidden within each and every putt. Lessons which reveal the science and the strategy that the pros use to make more putts.
Payne Stewart is the 1999 US Open champion. Oh my!
Pinehurst that year, 1999, might have been the most controversial US Open course in history. That's because most of Pinehurst's greens are shaped like this. They kind of look like turtle shells, or domes. And because Pinehurst is built on sand, it means that the course gets really dry. Anytime the US Open comes to Pinehurst, it usually plays really difficult, which is tough for pros. But fun for us, because it gives us a fascinating glimpse into how pros navigate on and around such tricky greens. To understand the strategy pros use to make putts, you have to draw 3 circles around the hole. Let's call these scoring circles. The outermost circle is the biggest. That's the area where golfers are off the green, or on the very edge of the green, and pretty far away from the hole. Think of this as the 3-shot circle, because you're more likely to finish out in 3 shots from here than from 1 shot. For pros, this circle starts at about 40 feet. For amateurs, it's way closer, maybe like 25 feet. When pros hit a bad shot and find themselves in this zone, most usually look for an excuse to putt. Sometimes, obviously, that's not possible. Maybe because their ball is in the rough, or because there's a bunker between their ball and the hole. Or maybe it's because the ground is just too soft and wet for you to hit a putt. It's one of the many reasons why pros do everything to avoid missing on the short side, where all of these things become a factor. Missing on the short side forces you to hit a higher, more difficult greenside shot with a wedge, something they'd rather avoid. But whenever that's not the case, they're trying to pull a putter. And if not a putter, then make a putting stroke style motion with another club, maybe a delofted wedge or a hybrid, which sends the ball toppling forward like a putt, especially on a dry course without much rough like Pinehurst. It basically takes the worst case scenario out of the equation. Pros 3-putt about 20% of the time once they get outside of 60 feet. But do the math and those 3 putts are worth the trade, because putting a putter in your hands takes the disaster scenario off the table way more often. It sounds simple, but the number 1 priority from this circle, even for pros, is to get your ball safely onto the green. Just ask stats genius Eduardo Molinari, the man behind Europe's wildly successful Moneyball Ryder Cup strategy.
You know, I see this in the programs every week. Obviously, we play super tight fairways, firm and fast greens compared to what they're used to. And they're like 3 yards short of the first green, and they pull out a lob wedge with like nice fringe in front of them, and the pin is like 5 on, and it's like, no, you should putt this. Oh, but I never putt this. I'm like, yeah, trust me, you can putt this. A poor putt is going to go 6-7 feet away, and it's better than your best chip shot of the day. And then sure enough, they pick up the lob wedge and they duffed it in front of them. It's like, oh, I should have heard you. I should have listened to you.
Compare a 30 to 60 foot putt to the same length chip, and you'll find that the make rate is way higher on putts. Your proximity is also 5 feet closer, and you're also way more likely to get up and down in 2 shots. Taking what feels like a 3-putt from the fairway is annoying, but again, it's worth the trade. Martin Kaymer did this masterfully back in 2014. He putted off the green from everywhere. It was kind of boring to the eye, but it worked spectacularly. Move a little closer and you'll arrive in the second scoring circle. The circle that I call the black hole. The area when you're not making many putts, but you're also not 3-putting too often. 2-putting is clearly the most likely outcome from here. For pros, this circle spans from about 10 feet to about 50 feet. For a 10 handicap, it goes from about 7 feet to maybe 30 feet. Pros find themselves in this 2-putt black hole zone really often, especially during the US Open, when the pins are tucked, the greens are crispy, and par is a good score. Stephen Sweeney is one of the tour's top putting coaches who teaches multiple major champions, and he says the strategy on these putts is to go high and soft.
A putt that is read too high will only miss by about 50% of the distance that it's overread by, whereas a putt that's read too low will miss almost 3 times lower than what the misread was. The ball just starts going downhill much earlier in the entirety of the putt. So if we hit a 30-footer and you overread one by 2 feet, you're only really missing it a foot high. Whereas if you underread one by 2 feet from 30 feet, even if your speed's great, you're at least 6 feet low of the hole. And the chances are that because you've read it that low, it's going downhill much, much earlier for a longer period of time. So now you've got a 6-footer it could be an 8 to 9 footer, even though you haven't really done much wrong other than misread the putt.
It's why when the green reading system Aimpoint measured this, they found that underread putts finish about twice as far away from the hole as the same putts that were overread. Instead of having gravity work for you, it's working against you and leaving your ball further away from the hole as a result. Trackman found that when the ball is rolling at 1.6 miles per hour, the makeable area of the hole is just 74%. But when the ball touches the hole at the slowest possible 0.01 miles per hour, you get 100% of the hole's area. Putts that would have lipped out are now lipping in. And it's why the average proximity on tour on putts that miss the hole is just 2 feet max. When pros hit putts from this range, they're crawling by the time they reach the hole. Then there's the third scoring circle, the smallest circle, and the one closest to the hole. This is the one-shot circle. These are putts that you're more likely to make than miss. The outer limit of this circle is really the most important thing, because that's where the make rate is closest to 50%. For pros, the outer limit is between 9 and 8 feet. For a 5 handicap, it's closer to 6 feet. The further back you can push this line, the more you can gain on your peers. The best example of this I can think of is Brian Harman at the Open Championship last year. Brian Harman made 44 of 44 putts inside of 10 feet, which meant that week, Harman's inner scoring circle pushed out to something like 12 feet, which is actually kind of insane. But wherever the outer line is for you, this is the crucial make or break zone for every golfer. Because as Scott Fawcett, the founder of Decade Golf, explains, literally every inch further away you are from the hole from this distance matters.
10 feet, something like that, is really where you start getting a good chance to make it. And every inch inside of, from 3 to 8 feet is 1% of your make rate. I don't really care if you're 15 or 20 feet. It's kind of like whatever, or 20 or 25 feet. It's kind of like whatever. But the difference in 3 and 8 is a half a shot. And so really just being patient and accepting you're going to have a bunch of 15 to 30 foot putts, and you're probably not going to make very many of them, but you're going to par the course to death, try to play the par 5s well and not make stupid bogeys. Like, that's the recipe for great golf.
That's why you see pros practicing these putts like crazy. Yes, they're boring putts, but every extra one of these boring putts you make, you're gaining on golfers who lose the coin flip. You may make par because of it, and your playing partner, they may make bogey. And ultimately, that's it. That's the formula pros use around the greens. And it's what you should use too. When you've missed the green, your goal is simple. Avoid disaster. Putt whenever you can. Just get your ball back into position on the green as simply as possible. When you're stuck in the black hole, go high and go soft. And from the innermost scoring circle, you gotta run up the margins. Take interest in the boring ones, because the more of these you make, the more it'll matter. And that's what Payne Stewart did so well that day back in 1999. He carefully lagged up all his long ones. He went high and soft on all his medium ones, and he made all his short ones. A 3-part formula which, at the end of it all, left golf fans with a memory they'll never forget.
Payne Stewart is the 1999 U.S. Open champion.